Hello everyone, the History of Pi channel is with you. All over the world, there are a huge number of houses and structures covered with the first floors. Monasteries and fortresses are buried inside and outside for several meters. For example, watch my video about the Savino-Storozhevsky Monastery, the link under the video. Also, the Moscow Polytechnic is covered with 8 meters. There was a global catastrophe in the past, but the official history is silent about it. According to historians, there is nothing strange that the first floors of the building are underground. Firstly, this is a cultural layer, and secondly, some cities suffered from floods, and therefore the citizens simply brought hundreds of thousands of tons of soil to the city on carts, and filled up all the first floors of buildings by 6 meters, got rid of the floods. In other cases, for example as in Seattle, the city did not have a normal sewer system, and in order to lay a normal sewer system, the city center was also covered with several meters of soil, burying the first floors of buildings. The link to the video about this will be in the description. So now we see a huge number of buildings filled up with the first floors. And few people doubt that a few centuries ago there was some kind of catastrophe, maybe a worldwide flood or an asteroid fall. There are versions that even a nuclear war. For me, it doesn't really matter what it was, the war or the flood. I have always been interested in the date of this cataclysm. And here on the Stolen History Forum, I seem to have found the answer to this question, and I'm going to tell you now when the world catastrophe occurred. To do this, let's look at the maps of Africa, 1802 year. It was compiled by Aaron Errol Smith. He became famous for the fact that in 1790, he made the largest map of the world. According to the Mercator projection, Aaron's cards were considered the best in the 19th century. He was also a founder and fellow of the Royal Geographical Society. In general, he was the best cartographer of the 19th century. Let's take a look at the map of 1802 year, which was compiled by the most scrupulous cartographer. The sparsely populated north of Africa is visible in front of us. The Sahara Desert, there are almost no cities. Well, in general, nothing unusual. The desert, no one lived in these places. Let's move on to the central part of Africa. We see a huge, white spot of uninhabited territories. There are no rivers and cities. And this map is the best cartographer. Now let's look at the map of 1570. In northern Africa, cities and rivers are marked in the Sahara region. It can be seen that this is a well-lived continent, and this map is 1570th year. Let's move on to Central Africa. We see many cities and rivers. There are large lakes. So, on the map of the 16th century, the central part of Africa is very well populated, and on the map of the 18th century, there is an unknown white spot on this place. Here's a look. Where have all these cities gone? Now let's look at the map of Africa, 1676th year. Compared with the map of 1570th year, we see that the number of settlements in Central Africa has increased many times. Rivers and lakes are well drawn. It can be seen that this is a well-lived area with many cities. There are just giant lakes. But if you go to the map of 1802 year, there is none of this at this place. Here's a look at how heavily populated this area is. But in 1802, they didn't know anything about it anymore. They didn't know about these cities and rivers. One might think that the map of Africa of 1676 year is a throw-in. It was simply copied by modern maps. Let's compare it with a map of the 20th century. And what do we see? We see that on the map of the 20th century, there are no such lakes and rivers as on the map of the 17th century. We see a completely different terrain. Here's a comparison of what happened. There are many river towns. And if we go to the area of the Sahara Desert, then we see again a well-inhabited territory with cities, rivers, and lakes. There are no lakes and rivers on the map of the 20th century. Here's a look. And on the map of 1802nd year, we do not see cities, lakes, and rivers. We see the territory of a huge desert. It turns out that in 1802, all the rivers and cities had already disappeared in this territory, and only the huge Sahara Desert remained. The situation is the same on the map of the 20th century, and we cannot say that the cartographer of the 19th century worked poorly. Here's a look at how he sketched this part of Africa in detail. It can be seen that each locality was marked. And here is a map of Africa, 1740th year. We see hundreds of settlements in the area of the Sahara Desert, and again rivers and lakes. In the central part of Africa, we also see a huge number of rivers and lakes. But on the map of 1802, it's all gone. There is nothing of this anymore, no lakes, no rivers. So, according to the maps of Africa, we can determine that until the middle of the 18th century, the territory of Africa was well populated. There were many cities, rivers, and lakes. But at the beginning of the 19th century, a huge part of Africa simply turned into a desert. I think we are seeing the consequences of a global catastrophe, and Africa has suffered more than others from this catastrophe. If in other countries, the first floors of buildings are simply filled up, then in Africa hundreds of cities have been destroyed. Huge lakes have disappeared, rivers have disappeared, and most likely the real white population of Africa has disappeared. Look, I have a video on this topic, the link will be in the description. And yet, it is in North Africa, in the Libyan desert, that the Libyan desert glass is found. The purest natural quartz glass ever found on Earth. Glass is usually yellow in color. More than 1,000 tons of this glass are scattered across the Libyan desert. The glass of the Libyan desert is absolutely unique in its chemical and physical characteristics. Maybe this glass is the remains of some alien body that exploded in Africa, or it's the remains of a dome that used to cover the Earth. In general, there was a catastrophe. The territory of Africa has completely changed. And now, according to ancient maps, we can see when this happened. On the map of the 18th century, Africa is still a prosperous continent where there are many cities, rivers, and lakes. But on the map of 1802nd year, we see another Africa where cities have already been destroyed. Rivers have disappeared. We see the consequences of a huge catastrophe. And judging by the tattooing on the maps, it occurred in the second half of the 18th century. The link to the maps will be under the video. They are in good quality. You can examine everything in detail yourself. That's it. Watch my channel.